So when we talk about document libraries, it's important that we talk about them in a context. There were things that we learned to tolerate in Microsoft Windows. We didn't necessarily love them, but we've all learned to hack our way around them. And one of the significant limitations of Microsoft Windows is it doesn't really have the ability to allow us to be able to label externally our documents except by using a file name. So if I want to say I'm going to save this document, and this document is a budget for 2014 for the HR department, all I can do is give it a file name. And I might have a clue that it's a budget because it's in Excel instead of in PowerPoint. But that's a fairly limited way to think about how we could label things. It's sort of like if we were thinking about a grocery store, and this is bear with me if you've seen me talk about metadata in this way before, but imagine that we're working at a grocery store that is one of the places that has food that's sort of generic. It's not labeled, and you can save a lot of money if you don't really care what's in the cans. And so we have cans of things. They're cans of vegetables, but they all basically look the same. It's one can after another. Some of them have beans in them, some of them have carrots in them, but they're just cans of vegetables, and they all look identical. So the question is, how do we label these cans of vegetables so that we can meaningfully go back and find the carrots or find the beans? One way to do it, and it's really the Windows way, is to create a great big box, label it beans, and to create another great big box or pallet, label it carrots, and then when the cans come in, we take them off the bean truck and we put beans in the beans box. We put carrots in the carrots box. And this is how we label our data, just like this. Now, there's an obvious problem here. What happens if sometime between the time the bean truck arrives and we take the cans off, they get set aside and they look identical to the carrot cans? We, in other words, can't really tell. And if somebody's shopping in our store and picks up 3 cans of beans and then decides, oh, I don't want them, and puts them back in the carrots bin, we won't know that we have beans sitting in the carrots bin. This idea of having great big boxes that we label and put things into is exactly how Windows works, because we create a folder, we call it beans, and we put all of our files related to beans in the beans folder. We put all of our file related to carrots in the carrots folder. But I'm assuming all of you have been to a grocery store that actually has something else. And what it has is it has a label that goes right on the can. That label that is applied directly to something like this is called metadata. Metadata is data about our data. And actually, if we go to the grocery store and pick up a can of beans off the shelf, it has a lot more than a label that just says beans. It has a picture of the beans. It has information about the nutritional value of the beans. It has information about the number of servings that are in the can and the total weight or content of the can. All of that is metadata. All of that is information. It's not the beans itself. It's information about the beans. And in the same way that we have an analogy of metadata in a grocery store, we have exactly the same thing if you think about the files that you store in Microsoft Windows or you store on a network share. All of them have a basic label, beans or 2014 budget for HR, but there's so much we might want to know about them that isn't immediately visible. We might want to be able to say what type of file it is, what template was used to create it, when it was created, whether or not there were other collaborators on the document. There's lots of information we might want to capture. We might want to say that this document's only good for 30 days and then it needs to be either reviewed or it needs to be removed from the library. All of that is metadata too, but Windows really gives us just the approach that says you can have some basic labeling, and you do that by creating folders or boxes that say budgets or HR, beans or carrots, and so on. SharePoint gives us a better way. It gets us out of this, because with SharePoint we can capture as much data as we need to specify about all of the documents that we create. And that's what's behind the whole idea of customizing libraries in Microsoft SharePoint, is that we are going to add categories of information that we want. We want to know when a document was created. That's easy. Windows does that too. But we also want to have some other information about the document. And in your handout, one of the scenarios I have here is a document library that I actually created, that I want to know not what application a document was created in, but what application it's used for. So this is a training library where we have documents used to train Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, SharePoint, and so on, where we have different versions of Office from 2003 to 2013. where we have different uses for the document. Perhaps it's a demonstration or a sample file, maybe it's an article or an overview. And then finally, we're tracking whether or not a document is active. If we did that sort of thing using Windows, what we do is we would create a folder for each version of Office, for example. A folder for 2013, a folder for 2010, a folder for 2007. We might create a folder inside of that for each version of a program. So we would have all of our Excel files in one folder. And as with our beans and carrots, when we put the folder in the wrong place, it gets really easy for us to consider the folder as lost. We don't even necessarily know where it is anymore. But if I can attach the label, the metadata, directly to the document, we're in a lot better shape. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start by creating a basic library, just as it works. So here we are on a site that's within the Milliman intranet. This is a practice place where we can work. We'll use this with the OPA group next week, and we've used it previously. And this is a document library that has had some customization. In this document library, we're collecting information about what file types we have here. That's automatically done by SharePoint, just as it would be by Windows. A file name or title, again, it would automatically be done in either environment. And when it was modified and by whom, because this is actually security. We always want to know how old or new a file is and that the person who put it in here had permission to actually post this file. But then we've added some metadata columns here. We've added what customer this particular document is related to. We've added a year that this document is relevant to, and we've added a quarter that this document is relevant to, because those are the custom columns that we want to have in this particular library. All of this is metadata. Some of it is automatically generated by Windows or by SharePoint, but customer, year, and quarter, those are custom metadata fields that we created in this particular library.